ومعهم.
Não me meça aqui. Conta no progresso.
Recording in progress.
Brother Rinpoche, we can see your screen. If we could do a sound check, that would be very helpful.
Alright. Hello, hello. Hello, can you hear us? Sound check, sound check.
Father Rinpoche, I see that you're unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything. If you're speaking, please send us a chat letting us know that you are speaking.
Hello, got to delay.
Another delay.
Hello.
Okay, we can hear you now, but not see you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, we were getting the high-pitched feedback sound again.
Now what is our dog sequence list? Yeah. Yes, got it.
Good morning, Gen Rinpoche, Tashi Delay.
Oh, nga dro delay gisla.
Good morning, Katrina.
Good morning.
Everyone online, we'll begin with some preliminary prayers for them in the chat box. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one who's gone, the foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of God's mysteries, destroyer, glory, conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings for refuge. We are no supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides, instead I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme sign, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I vow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning and clouds, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of the aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kayatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Tanda Dixon again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, do shit on. Oh, yeah, that thing. You have lesson good. Teba Timu Messi Tremes. Teba Timu Messi Tremes. Teba de Timu members Tremina Shere Sora. Teba Timu Messi Treme. Kumbula so make it Norgishos. Teba Jan Sosu Samultai, Tanda Shembe Norbute, Yendang Norbute, Shenda Troyake or Maresera. Teba Timu Messi Treme, Kumbula so make it Norgishos. Shenda Norchalene Kuma Kia Yora, Laya Duga. Whereas the Norchala Mo Kamba the Kangashan Namsa, Tobjakoja, Persian Drone, Kay Medua, some less, some short side mirror Sara. The Batim was Kumbula, so make it Norgi shows, Norgi show the Juvateresa. Vatimu message to me, Kumbula, so make it noise. Kundu Mongbe Transjums, Mongbe Transjum Gantires, Mongba Dangaras Tades ora. Juden de Chen de Chasha, long dorkin in a dra. Joachima Penjek and Gondula Mikovan Tobjek in a dra. Mele Tarwa the Tamjek but Tobjek in a Shikarina. Joa. Kundo Mongbe Transjum Surgeons, or Tezu Kangala Mongbe Mombate, Jumber Chenge, Landurkin, Chishin do Sheber Chenge, Tremita Resera. Kundo Mongbe Transjum Surgeons. Mongba de Trana Shisora, Nambelul, Nabiga Sheva, Tradilini Yoris, Yomobe Trada, and Nicasure. Oh, Mishibe Mombeta, Shitip Sigrata, Yomoda, Yomogishabe, Paxat in Ratanda. Yomote Yomobetas, Condonga, Tratola, so and dressimless over. You angel son and so to make a Yongora. This was a tragedy dog, never can get the Trasigora. Quando Mombe Tras, some surgeons. I can't do the Hako, Tamebala Soba, that is a Hako Nane, Mishibe Momba to the Rimbe Passer to Gora. Quando Mombe Transum Betting, Rado Chomega Sunjana is ora. Have you mangan but drug choice? This also got a check over. Landor Genet, that you to Woodachon and the Yarich on the Samu Karatanqueba. So Samlolia, Lotin Chetova, so Lapsi Captunge. Milia pay only take her sigdo Tamagunga, so Landor Chego Kari, Netsen de Chimapenja, so Chetugara. Have you mangan but drug choice? Lapcha can get so trouble, show the Jubati Racer at Tabate. Ever so some Tanda Shingiora. Any Neziani Karichuna, that teacher or the teacher or the chair. Jui Karim, Samutanje, a Julia Landor Chet, Kangahaku Yora. What you do? Have you managed but drug a choice? Homebody you can make your choice. Round to wood of Kazations on Echo, Jurame Genge, Pombar Juja, breve. But the most to Kumbal some again, you couldn't move a transition. Tabzu Manga don't but drag a choice order. Tabzu Manga don't but drag a choice. Pombar Juja, Minjur Zawi Chera. The Buddha of Kade Chosna, Drobunda Yachina, so to Buddha Chosna, Koya do Rishidara Dagmara. So Yahweh any I would jet Rivu Yongura. Pombar, so the Buddha of Shivichon, we will show you. Chavi Nasura, Umber Jojan Minjur, Zawis, Zawres, Trouble. I do you know when you maybe trouble the Resigara. Oh, yeah,
No.
amount of song I do. Lela was on the tragedy.
No. So here, to begin with a verse from the Jataka tales, the birth stories, here it says that listening is the lamp dispelling the darkness of ignorance. So our hearing, that which we know, is like a lamp that gets rid of the darkness, that lack of knowledge. And it's like a supreme wealth that cannot be stolen by thieves and such. So the knowledge that comes from our learning, from our having heard and thought about things, this is something that can't be stolen away. It can't be lost in any way. Like if we leave our house, maybe someone will go and steal everything out of it. Any other kind of wealth could be lost due to some sort of misfortune or something, or being stolen. But the kind of wealth that we gain from hearing is the supreme wealth that can't be stolen away in any kind of way. And the verse continues saying, this listening is like a weapon that overcomes the enemy of confusion. In Buddhism, our real enemy is our confusion, our delusion, our lack of knowledge about what it is that we should adopt and abandon. Not understanding karma, cause, and effect, we create the conditions to be born in the lower realms or to not be able to achieve liberation. But this is like a weapon that destroys that kind of not knowing. It gets rid of that enemy. So our delusion is our real enemy that prevents us from gaining what we want to have. In Buddhism, we identify two primary enemies: the enemy of our delusions or our afflictions, those kinds of things like anger and jealousy, hatred, competitiveness, those kinds of afflictions are our enemy. Due to that, we create karma and then take rebirth in the lower realms and so forth. And then our second enemy is the kind of obscurations to omniscience, those sorts of imprints left by that kind of ignorance. And it is then through our knowledge, through learning these things, that we are able to understand the faults of certain actions and eliminate the kinds of things that we don't know, our lack of knowledge. So our learning, our hearing is like a weapon in this way. And the verse then continues saying that it's the best counselor, teaching the proper method through personal instruction. So this is like the best kind of advisor that we could have. It gives us what we need in terms of what is explaining what is good, what is bad, what is it that's going to allow us to get out of the lower realms, what is it that allows us to act for our future lives, and so forth. So by knowing the kind of cause and effect relationship, we can actually develop those sorts of proper causes. So it's like the best kind of counselor, the best advisor that we can have is our own learning and knowledge. And it continues saying that our learning is like a steadfast friend, even in times of misfortune. So when bad things come along, this is a kind of friend that will be steadfastly with us, always by our side. Other friends, they might sort of turn away when times are bad for us, or maybe they're there a little bit closer when things are good. But here, the kind of learning that we gain is a friend that will always be with us, no matter what sort of misfortune, good or bad kind of things that we encounter. And so here, this is the verse will continue. We'll stop with that part of it.
Yeah, oh, the Casura. Angarazu Shungliarwa. Chunian, the Chulaka, Teba Mangachevina. There's some you could samlutan at the Mangashingra. Nambechu, they could tell some into Mara, the Shembadis, and Tagasha Cherry Mara. Tebache, Sambache, Combache, Tessam Comson Sigdo. Oh, the Tibet and that day, Tebakaze, Gachua, Teba Mambuchena, and then Mambushingridon, Tebeko among the Ravret, and this was some time at the Mayan with it. Tejones, some Jones, Samjung Sidu Tebe Tunda, Tende Sigdo, Tende Song Doa Samsa, Goade Rana, Tebe Shirap Sigora. Ade Tunda, the one country redo, Yingu Kusakardo, Sozo Samlutanche, Jeba Checha, or Timune Resha Samsa, Nishin Yesuna, Samjung Sigora. Sambale Chomeko, or Timune Resha, some Socially, Ishi Togiordo. Tebataga Namsantel Chasha in Barisam, Ishi Chente Marisum Gora. 소소 삼로당고라 소소 시행고라 미팅데 시기세자 마이바 소소 하고 아침인데 레세르 고르도 어디인데 삼중디 고야레 소소 삼로당 다데 교생 삼로당 인베 교생 가래 거바가래 어딘데 삼로당 어디 아버지 교생을 때는 아버지 신수는 삼중기 미신이 봤으라 아무들의 뒤중기 고아서라 퇴발 때는 어딘데 소도 아섬데 고아들에 테니 소소 삼루단데 야보신스 어디 던던고네 티라레도 아섬 소소소소리 이치랩소나 르베고네르다 다가세 몬데르 버사마요 다데 교생 삼루단데 어디 그바틴데 레샤티 용고베 교생 티르 레샤 아섬 예신이소나 남중 아주 지바 참마스라 제스파바 다데 교생을 때는 어디 레샤 아섬 예신이소나 삼중기 노케버와 뒤중 삼중식이라 삼중기 싫어하시. 근데 때 양내 양도 검놓고 저기 동다데 시험을 삼기 되게 말와. 메다마르지나 번에 소소줄에 땅진 요래. 땅진이 매버서야 된다. 양내 양도 삼을 땅고를 마도. 인도 저들이야. 요 통만 매번에 검되어 얼어와. 어디 인도 남산고 내수 친질로 이바하고나 남산 매버로 지금 말와. 양내 양도 검네. 미다바이나다 동해와이나다 동아이나다 잠바이나다 닝지이나다 가레이나 서바이나다 강가 양내 양도 검거마다 혼들께여바 하고 서발이연대여바 하고 아sam기들 말와 금지시연이 양내 양도 검거와 어디서 내가 갈서 금조스체 여삼 검성 고기어도 야
So here from the text, it's always emphasized that the more that we know, the more vast our hearing and learning, the more that we are able to contemplate and reflect for ourselves. Because really, that's what we need to do. We have first the hearing or the sort of wisdom arisen from hearing or learning, and then there's the wisdom arisen through our own contemplation, and finally the wisdom arisen through meditation. So hearing itself is not sufficient. When we gain the kind of wisdom of hearing, we think like, oh, this is what is said, this is what is explained, and so forth. But that mere knowledge is not sufficient to really gain certainty for ourselves, gain a kind of confidence in this. Rather, it's by having, again, a sort of vast amount of hearing that we are then able to contemplate in a really sort of expansive way. And this is where we, with reasoning and logic, ascertain for ourselves that it is really like this. Is this really how it is? And based upon sort of laying out reasonings, thinking about the logic of things and putting forth various kinds of arguments for things, that we are able to gain a kind of confidence, gain certainty for ourselves. Again, because it's not just sufficient to say like, oh, I know that these texts say this and this and this. That doesn't mean that we have really ascertained or gained real confidence in the meaning of that, but rather it's only when we, based upon our own kind of reasoning and reflection, laying forth various reasonings and actually thinking through things, contemplating and reflecting again and again, that we can generate a valid kind of inference of those things that really brings forth the wisdom arisen through contemplation. But again, that kind of wisdom arisen through contemplation is itself not sufficient. We need to develop the kind of wisdom arisen through meditation. When it comes to things like impermanence or selflessness, think about the self-grasping that we have. This is something that we have been habituated to through countless rebirths. And so just thinking about it a little bit, or just habituating ourselves a little bit to the opposite of that, the wisdom realizing selflessness, is not sufficient to eliminate that. We have to habituate ourselves again and again, familiarize our minds through the sort of wisdom of meditation that arises based upon having that hearing and contemplation for ourselves. So when it comes to things like contemplating selflessness or suffering, thinking about love and compassion and patience, these are things where we have to engage in them again and again through meditation. Like, say, even if we have contemplated well the kinds of faults of anger and the benefits of patience, we actually have to practice that. We have to meditate on that, habituate ourselves to it again and again in order to counteract the kind of strong habituations we have to the opposite. So just knowing through hearing and just knowing through contemplation are not enough. We have to sequentially build all of these kinds of wisdom.
오야 되네 다 최체베 수라 생계기 인해서 요도 그 소수 가르소래 생계디 트레스 통부치간데 대시제데 소수 강사기 치와인 삼기와 말도 최지 치와서 거도 최대서 하신 무슨 대던 달이야지 기대된데 야슈에데 어디 인삼고요래 제가 대두자 아마르르 마메데 주마세 버쳐 몰라로다 된 되제슈납테 다르다세 미다바 검고야다 최지 치와 인삼 티간테 아마도 소수지 지담미데 찍버라 아마도 메세티게 요마로와 근데 제고부터 좀 된데 실전진 도송배 값이나 좀 된데 라니지 대생기 추천발을 쇼세 좀 된데 라니지 실전 도송에 추두서 코란게 샴 어떤데 난게 어도 생기 추천발을 쇼세 최송에의 양다과 강란 직관 매바 셰쇼바 왜 내주다 팀바 어떤데 손자 강란 직관 매바 셰쇼바 손자 생기 추세 쪼쪼시게 어도 어디 인도 가서래 그로 소소야 보초체 아니 지 수치 셰베네 셰베 뭔지 규벨라마다 대수 강가를 소화도 존데 대수 상마랑 걸 소소티 땅니로 실매치 셰고요라 어야니 셰드자 셰제 슈델이 지단코 셰단 이르지요라雄심이 뜬다고 시자인 배찬에 때는 뵙시다 소소 심비를 바카둘이 자네 냠솔 랑글랑게 셰단을 진이어도 어디 니그나네 또 심비를 자네 해지도 지지 셰고를 송겨도 아주디 삼로리 앞에 던달야 셰셰 던다데 소소 셈다 자네 랑도르기 네카리네 데다파 자네 셰고레스 동지식도 안 동드비네 제대사 되고 소소 심비를 때네 멜론데 마스네 소소 심비 멜론나 셰셰 아니 레도 껴 카르도 연데카 카르체르도 소소 메시 나로라스테나 연도진 바세기 세기 셰티 치고도 어디 나신데지 삼르단에 냥고레 송고도 셰고레 셴게게 또 심뷰라 펜베시도 파조데 심뷰단 제니 셰고레스 지탄고 셰셰 내수 셰셰 내수 때는 법에 주기 셰베나 예산 펜도 연구 말와 나가주 같은데 섬기와 남주가주 세리번도 지나치 유다견기 깨다도 또 삼로타디 코 유안도다도 삼데 코좀 메다와서 삼차되거라 이 코란 피게 뒤에 삼바도 소소 심기 남규된데 삼기도 일단 제일네 티게 삼로타기 오마라 남베셔데 코티 시제네즈 땅을 법도 소소 남규 인데 멤버 삼기도 왔다 데레모도 안 데레도 아삼제 소소 셈다 차네 유아르지 누군 후시체 삼로타고 요라 어 담마운다서 야 어디시나
So here, when it comes to then explaining the Dharma, those of us who are listening as well as those explaining, we need to have the proper sort of understanding here. Now, when someone is explaining the Dharma, they're usually sitting on a high throne, and someone might think that that's sort of out of respect for the greatness of the person that's teaching, but really it is emblematic of the greatness of the Dharma. So these are the kind of things that we need to reflect upon. And like someone who is teaching the Dharma, giving a kind of explanation, they shouldn't be sort of grasping at their own self. We should, again, like the verse that was recited at the beginning of class, like a star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a drop of dew or a bubble, see conditioned things as such. We should, again, remember impermanence and not be sort of caught up in maybe pride or something while explaining the Dharma. And again, the sort of symbolism of sitting on a lion throne is to represent teaching the Dharma with the four fearlessnesses, as the Buddha has explained to Maitreya. It's sort of the kind of teaching in accordance with the way that things are, having that fearlessness that it's not wrong in any sort of way. And these kinds of this is the symbolism behind putting such a high throne. It's not for the person, but rather for the kind of greatness of the Dharma. And again, when we imagine our own root lama sitting on a throne, embodying all of the previous lineage lamas and so forth, and imagining them descending into us and blessing us, there's a blessing that comes from that. But again, it's not just because of the sort of like highness of the person, it's through the Dharma itself. And so when we are thinking about the two ways in which we could explain something, there is the way where we are putting forth something so that it is to be understood, like, oh, it is this, and these are the facts of something. And then there is the way in which we explain that really meets with someone's own mind, that actually sort of gets at their continuum and the kind of faults that they have there. So we could imagine this is like really striking at the heart of our own faults. We're not just sort of learning or hearing these things in order to know them as facts that are out there, but rather, again, we see like the Dharma is likened to a mirror. When we put that mirror to our own selves, we're looking to sort of be able to wipe away the faults. That's the reason why we are putting that mirror there. So it's not just for our hearing the Dharma is not just sort of to determine, oh, this is the way that things are. Like we could take the example of scientists. I mean, scientists examine the causes and effects of things. They are well aware that, say, things are impermanent, but they don't apply that sense of impermanence to themselves. It's sort of just like a factual thing that is there. We need to see the Dharma and what is taught in relation to our own minds, really meeting our own continuums and making an impact there. The Dharma is not being explained just for the purpose of sort of gaining knowledge of facts, but again, it's to apply to our own mind.
Oh, yeah, Pinanganjo, Ragbe Medabandi Samlata in Arwa, which are not today in Gudwa. And I mean, Ravichi, so Yende Ravichi. Some sort of Nagi Sarah, Rotary Medu Sarah. It's anyhow lawyer can do try a cover a chat thoughts and do menda chadi. The highest teacher Mirage Trone, Mukichi, Tronsha, Chiji, Nashasana. Came marriage and the cookie, my cocorana, some other case saw me do. That's also John order. I want to so it in the rare some. Namjing in Mary, so can't draw the so at Nani, Tamat in the Karanatuni. When I raise some such an assembly archive, shall do when you watch it dry shora. I just Saturn nation could shitty could say the could do the Senate came door. I did some without so young than some danes, Medava Rabotas so similar. And you are done. She gave it his name good. Mirrors and mirrors she strong to Aina. I tell you, simply simply Tabjaco Jack in the Tronsons. Simply Chera. You don't go round shitty chairs, simply in the pack of Macanga, you rang Shima to Madeira. Or T. Tabjaco Jal teacher. Tabjaco Jack and Marisha Bessena. I'm going to sometimes I navigate a woman to Chichi, she seduces and called Tadengi or Richera. They try to cover the chassis, they call Tadengi or they say, oh, I do get on your das and drew dressing das, yes, so that you didn't cover the shara. So you're not to do the Haguerichiora or subsuch over there, some attending on some such. Timanico Tasha, oh, okay, medicine. Until so the same about charge a teacher or stand up her son. Each and its horrors in Yamji, Yamson Yonjan, assembly and George Duadua. You meant them down a sort of shape, projected in some. He gave us a run to a cousin love some show. 야가 별연도서 미트로도서나 공부도 쇼게 가보네 계그래 통해서 말에 담배 소소년들도 통구라 마다 지단 미토에서 말아 야가도 에는 님의 권리가 연구를 좀더 단도 하세 벌리 경의 동시지 세용아 배배다 아 경고도 실수는 아니면 동제 미간게 개잡제 누구도와 메시 타르초스 세규사라 누가 되게 세규모도와 로캠부시에 트론소나 어제다 동제 미만부도야 키제 풍부즈 키제 누구도와 메시 타르초스 세르치 이 많이 벌리 치네고 졸라라 뒤치니 체령부전 시에치는 거 야버지 해대어라 지치도 조진 상을다나 이스기 유서와 다이는 가지 하시는 경아도 생각도 지지 동전 러시아데 야고 말해서 다들 소소 삼을 단다를 지래도 어디인데 가지 자갈 담불래도 된다 용도 공부도 키체 루트서 안에 샘을 소화하죠 니제 삼자 삼을 코르기도 아침마고 망다라 쉬지 좀 기도만 러시아리아도 마도 킨데 사도 킨두에 서라시 소용도 시기도 어디 손자 가르서라 소소 삼을 단주가 주단 될네 삼을 단나 소소단 될네 삼을 단나 펜도셔라 야 뒤질람네 마마다서
So, for example, when we think about course impermanence, like when we see friends or family, for example, that die, we can imagine that this is something that we might have to face. Like often when we see someone else, maybe someone that we don't know that dies, or someone gets sick and so forth, we see it as sort of like over there. Like this isn't something that we think about as happening to ourselves. Sometimes when we have a situation where someone close to us that we are very familiar with dies, we might have a sense of like, oh, this is actually going to happen to me. But often when we see this happen in other people, like someone dies, they carry away their corpse and so forth, we see other people get sick and all of these things. We're almost as if we're looking at inanimate objects. We don't have a whole lot of feeling about the kind of experience that they are going through. Now, maybe when it's like someone that we are close to and they suddenly pass away, there's a kind of worry that will arise, like, wow, they died so suddenly, and you might have a sense of like, oh, this could happen to me. And again, there might be a sort of discomfort that comes with that. But again, it's the nature of things. We too are going to have to pass away. And so it's important that when we reflect on these things like course impermanence, we actually see it as a kind of experience that we will have to have. It's not just to sort of make us depressed or something like that, but we should really have a feeling about this, that this is something that we are going to have to face. It's not just something that sort of happens to other people. Like when, over time, there are signs, like as you age, your hair gets white and things like that. It's a sign that you're going to have to die, but we somehow sort of like push that off as if like, oh no, not going to happen to me. And so when we it's an experience that when we witness these things, we shouldn't see it as if it's something happening to inanimate objects. For example, in India, before in Tibet, they would take out, if someone had died, they might take the corpse out at a very like early time. And so you wouldn't really see that. But when we came to India, you would often see them carrying corpses, like people who have died, they would be carried out of the house. And often when it's like a person that had lived to an older age, they're sort of like banging on drums and making a whole lot of noise, sort of almost celebrating it because someone had a long life. Whereas someone who dies sort of in the prime of their life or dies in their youth, we see it as like such a waste. And this is, something that is really tragic. But the fact is that we are all going to have to face that kind of fate of having to die. And when we see these things repeatedly, sometimes we can sort of become numb to them. Like, oh, it's just sort of like they're carrying rocks or dirt or something, instead of actually using that reflection of course impermanence as a kind of contemplation to change our own mind.
Oh yeah, then go get the so gasoda. Mission da share just and this loves on ane. Share any yene ko ke mardo share would I. Imado go church, Pajodi, Shodipa, Juriet and the Malana, so share roches Malana, Pajodipa, Juriet and Tindrit and Darshana, Meroshera, Masua, 제번 메시아로 그런 최셰로스나니 최셰스 이면에 그런 줄로 셴다르지니 틀리하고 줄로도 겨고요 삼시게 되는 메셔르다 소하고래니 sö내니 마시셔고레스 셰데 단타샤나시 오 최셰베가서 심비운데야다 셈다 자네 랑도르히네 메시코란다 자네 봐 셰고레스 슝 때는 뭐 지구던다로 셰기요 말 틀리야 세계 방에다 직전에 지단 고아조 제시하고래서 세계 경험을 용어 삼지 십시 초를 쉬게 되느니 고마대서 셔라 뒤디고 딜 로주신 것도 가서래 남들 하잖아요 것도 내가 최신게 십보도 시중으로 가담벨라 말와 내가 최지의 세세 그 시중이라 가담벨라 멤버리에 군이치디 백해바 첨부래도 내 최시여대 시다 팽기면도스 메솔레 셈 팽면도스 시보도 최시에는 아니티 밀 팽보용 거라 그 시보도를 컨디션 때 가려서 해봐서 어디 공개 최시에데 시제 내주 때는 배워한도 전에 시여래서 또 이치지르다 마마르다 사고에 되는 하고는 들음마다 고라 심기스 된데 배워 말아 지되게 셈게 동제 대사르데 셈게 삼루탄다 알파 조체데 니 셈데 심규단 데네 파조텔라 또 소소 파조데 셈데 유주탄 텔레테네 대단 델니 셰요레스 인디펜던시아 용거를 송도 어디 다 되질라나
So here, when it comes to the one who is giving a Dharma explanation, if they were asked by someone who wants to hear about the Dharma, then that is fine. But usually it's said that we shouldn't give teachings unless they are requested. If people haven't made that kind of request or haven't asked, you don't provide a sort of teaching. Now, in other traditions, there is a kind of, they feel the need to spread the teachings regardless of whether others have asked. But here again, the reason for giving teachings is in order to transform the mind, to actually work on our own mind, to examine our faults and work to overcome them. And so this is really the way in which one needs to teach. And so there is a story that is given in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand by Pabonka Rinpoche, where it explains there was a Geshe Potoa, one of the Kadampa masters, and another Geshe. And this other Geshe asks, why is it that my teachings don't seem to be benefiting people's minds in the way that yours do? And Potoa explained that you need to teach in a way that is not just sort of in order to gain knowledge of particular topics, like this is this and this is that, sort of listing out things in a way of just sort of learning facts, but one needs to teach in a way that is really meant to meet the minds of the people, to get at working on their minds. So teaching is not just for gaining the kind of knowledge, but rather for one needs to teach in a way that is impactful to the people to be able to work on their own minds.
뭐야 tani shenge kulu inarwa amnyandra ta chi penjo ta chi tendre yoya ta tendre zo chen tendre tendal shekyo marese shenli a pena sam chamba ta zo sora shen ngele zo ta yo thoye tendal jamje samlu ta dembe ko ne shen la pena sam sanje chum den de so be chute shenli a chi shene te lu ko simbi la pena sam ondo lami ko ban thoye ta tarba tamje kimbo thoye 사변지 심기된도 바차샤고요 섬 직바도 마스네 직된지 가고요 섬사 랍첨부예 섬 예첨부 시부지 섬 팬첨부 시부지 섬 진짜촌에 세고래 섬도 야
And the one who is giving teachings, their motivation should not be to gain a good reputation or fame or anything like that, but rather they should be thinking, may this be of benefit to those who are listening. May these teachings bring a benefit to the minds of those who hear them. So the teachings of the Buddha are all for that purpose of being able to transform our minds. And so in this way, the one who is explaining should look at these teachings and think this is these bring such a vast benefit of being able to put down the kind of imprints of seeds for others to be able to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, or gain the kind of definite goodness of liberation. And so reflecting on the very great benefit of these teachings and wishing that they bring about those benefits, the one explaining should set their motivation.
Oh yeah, that's engage ulung de samlo tanda te tende nyangure songdo 지켜볼 것인고요. 손내 론덴 테니에 냠분네 치차워셔스. 로 소르 네바스거라. 소르네세데. 손내 론덴스 로드던 덴버스거레스 거라. 렉셔디 kunyenje들 테니 요바스거레스 케주 숨셰도. 손내 론덴 테니에 냠분네 치차워셔스. 텐데 간사데 케 냠변네도 로아레스 거라. 체 냠변 냥게디게 삼루 텐데 촌네 냥고레스. lo sur ne ba se ti ke chambare nang be chu ri she gu na da su chu shen ge su ne su su nyan de ni nyan ba yin na lo de dang bu ne chak dang ge wan de man ro ko de o ko she ja ja ma yin gu de sam sa sam da ya ji she no da ko chang bu de she gu ma re sam sa so so gu cho ra chen chen ji dang bu ne nang ba re ji o ma nang ba yin nang ba she ja sam ma nang be shu ne she ja sam ma de ba yin sam 현대 지구에서는 대tembai 엄마를 삼텐데 삼비오 엄마를 제라 소소 카둘 단계르지 신공계 신부신 직된 감리야 이부 담보 망보 요르다 출루 망보 요라 담메다 망보 소샤 요라 어때서 컨데지나 삼자르지 소소파 초질 말로제 아무니네 초질 논나니 현대 대시에 되는 고나와 좀 말해 남중가지 지시도 메신 공부에 시켰는 공부 장자 통과를 시시도 소소 초데 마도 현대 그 통과 말에 karma karshene taare 그치 시에마도 tempo 말에 삼겨봐 아치디 많이 바시나 어디 tempo에 삼 소소 초소자 코티 tempo에 삼기로 근데 매바시 코치 소소 거둘이야 이 지시에도 어디시 근데이나 삼자르시 로 수르 내봐 로 거둘 내봐 초수 말로 하지 거라 초실 발로네 때임을 현대 karshene tempo에 삼겨 말아 단지 좀 된데 송구도 좀 된데 송샤바 강가 tempo 만세세 소소 삼로 단타제 치세 아니 대야분도 삼나 냠술랑 송구도 세제타로 에서신도세 이 송에 데카레스네 렉바탈랑아이가 라와체 쿠치메 송라 세제타로 에서신도세 무스탈랑가 라와체 쿠치메스테 라와체 매밤 셴지 캐번 중메자세 디야부레 삼타치도 매바라체네 주교 말에세라 셴지 캐번 주선 셴지 고네 랑게 덤바임바다 랑게 미리임바다 시지임바다 초신름 셰셰 인데션이 양구 말에서 오라 네 초선로에 셈바데 매스 구어도 오 데인도 가르사람 안데 지시하고 선비한테 저 안되려 아야 되네 가서래 로 소르 내바시 거래서 손에 론덴스 로 소르 내바 맨 가르셔나 임버셔나다 멤버시셔나다 소소데 인사마도 퍼져들 임마이 딱제 연구 말와 소소 제바제데 가르쳐 선고르서 산제 소소 삼로시다나 소소 신루라 지지레 세계서 임바레 섬샤샤나 미시게 세르지마도 요 말와 소소 삼로시다제 과르라 다디 레세 마레스 셰르지 차르와 어디 인디가 소소 신고라 소소 신고도 소소 제바제 있어라 소소 제바제는 소소 시럽 요하러와 산제지 르 요하러와 간주 소소로 데 배치 마셔지 샤샤 요르마도 제바레 제제지 섬로다는 거 야르야르 요하라 야르 매버시 메신게지 랑신지 주 같은 데시게 말와 어디 인디가 소라 손에 론데 소소 제바제 고레 소야데 소소 신고라 소소 로드 개고라 마도 산제 좀 되된 알레 큐케 현재 제바진 다시시 송고요 말봐 소소소 로드 개고요도 내 잠부터 템바 강에 버디 시트 그래서도 손에서 로드던 템바지 거를 마도 싫은 매네야 가르셔네 데 임버레 삼데 그래 생게데 가르셔네 데 임버레 삼 인데 위기레 삼 소소 삼로게 땅고 마 인데 위기레 삼 인기레 삼 샤샤라 네 되게요 말 로드던 템바지 거를 스네 론데 Tönyi yubas kora, tinga shengu yu samsachi. Ike chimbu inga shengu yu samsachi korwa. Shintu mena ene ko nyena ko shida tegi mara. Pena shingbari ji kole, shinga tabyada, jimeto tabyada, tinte kole chi nyen dungi michi na, chiga shingbe kole shegi yu na. Chidi rigwa shida mewa shi, chidi rigwa yabu shida yu na, ko shingbe kole tinte kole shintu ke mena nyen nyenba yu na, chidi tona suyo mara ko dawa te shara, chidi sabso ji nyen gira. Nyendu tondi kole china, chidi li yabu shegi wara, rigwa menge dili ya, ko tona chigi wara tönyi ya. Chidi li shegi suyo mo, ho chi shegi suyo sigma do. Tönyi mena ni che do. Ne shab dewa tabus. Ne timachen tabus. Ne kabuba tabus sumli pecha yoba. Ne timachen sidi ne jechi na lo liya. Tima yuna chakdan lo suru ma nebichi tambu ne shungzin che nyengechi na. Ulu kyon shuk sari che na. Ne timachen tabure. Ina le se lu chi che ne ko chakdan ki jechi kechi she chi chandu kyon jen chi rindu gyorwa. Hendo yung ma resun gyorwa. Tani karsura. Ne kabuba sidi de. Ni ya kabusha ne tinal ma chi ne che tinal chi da lu na ma ru ma do ko chi lo do sha ma to chi shira mena ko ti yung ma re chara shira mena ko ju thu ma ro ne kabuba ta ba de chi she do she chi u sam sa te ma do so sam dang ma ro ne kabuba ta ne kabu na se ya ga ma lu na na lo de ke yo ma do ya ne ti ma je da ma re ne shabd wa ta ba shabd wa ta ba ne ko to nye mena chi ne ene chi ne namsan dosha de shabte no wol ma ru kona na le ke go mara so samlo na le ke go mara chere so ne shabde wa ta bo ne chi ma che ta bo ne kha bo ba ta bo de ke ma yo che ne ya bo che so ne lo de te nya bo ne chi cha war che nya go re song do sa je jin de ka so le par rab du nyo la yi la song she song do le par se rab du nyo la yi la song she oda nyenge zogo tende se nyengu yara o te che dibache ta karine mena o tirinde sanje sungbe salu chambe dol yara wa te bada samba bomba rimgi chene nego ngondo lami ko ban tobarche migo chupa rwa yo chutumne lami ko ban tobarche ya te samgi mechoba ni wale tendo tarba chi che te che do ni chagdan pang ko seba pang ko rwa tangji pang ko re chagdan mong som se do di taba samba chene tada rimgi pane negam ngondo lami ko banda tene rimgi abada tamje kebe ko ba chine ja to bar chasam eche do chunye gi sam kulo se da ne sambar shu so atendere ya.
So then, those who are listening to the teachings, as Arya Deva has said in his 400 verses, should listen with an unbiased, intelligent mind that is wanting to hear, that sort of striving to implement whatever one is hearing. That kind of disciple then is a suitable vessel for listening to the teachings. So this first term, like having an unbiased mind, we shouldn't be under the control of attachment and aversion. Like we shouldn't think, oh, well, I'm Buddhist, so everything that these Buddhists say, like it is that way. I'm just going to accept everything that they say because I have attachment to this side. That's not the proper way to listen. Or on the other hand, like looking at the texts of other traditions and saying, you know what, these are not Buddhist, so they have nothing valuable to say whatsoever. We should have a kind of open, curious mind. There are many different teachings that are beneficial, and we should approach them with that kind of non-bias. We shouldn't sort of have like, for example, if you're wearing blue glasses, everything is going to look blue to you. You're going to be tainted by those glasses that you are wearing. And so we shouldn't sort of fall into this kind of bias where we think like, oh, well, this isn't a Buddhist text, so this is the way it is, I just accept it. We need to think about it for ourselves. This kind of having an openness to things where we don't come at them with already preconceived ideas of like, this is going to be good or this is going to be bad based upon our own attachment. This is the first kind of quality. So we should examine these teachings in relation to our own mind. Again, as the Buddha has emphasized repeatedly, you should take up my teachings after examining them well, seeing them to be beneficial, not just out of respect. As he explains, we should examine them as you would gold, in the way that you want to make sure that that's actually gold. We should take up these teachings and look up at the various reasonings. We shouldn't take them up out of respect. We shouldn't say like, oh, well, my teacher said this, or people of my kind said this, or my particular lineage said this. That's not the sort of proper reasoning to adopt something, to have a belief in it, but rather we need to think for ourselves. And that begins first with an unbiased mind, not coming at the teachings, approaching them with attachment or aversion, and also having a kind of intelligence. We need to understand them for ourselves. If we're only able to say, oh, well, so and so said this, that's not really an understanding. That's not really knowledge, but rather our knowledge of something comes through our own reflection. So we all have this kind of Buddha nature. We all have the ability to think and reason and develop our wisdom. It's only due to a sort of lack of use that we haven't improved it, that we haven't developed this, but we have the capacity to improve and develop it. It really is a matter of working to expand our own intelligence, to really use reasoning and use logic in order to be able to say it is this way based upon a proper kind of reasoning, not just remaining in this, well, it's probably like that, or it's probably like this. We need to be able to recognize what is and isn't based upon reasoning and logic. And that requires having a kind of intelligence. And we all have that capacity, that we can improve that more and more. And so then we need to last have a sort of a desire to learn, a drive to learn, a striving to want to put this into practice. So when we are listening, we should be someone who is wanting to know. It's not just sort of like we're sitting there not really paying attention or not thinking about it. Like, think if there's someone who is, say, very intelligent and they're listening to a lecture about farming and they don't really care. They're not really paying attention to it. And on the other hand, you might have someone who's not as intelligent, but they really want to know this because this is important for them. They're going to really take up what is said in that lecture, whereas the other person is sort of like not even paying attention, not even there. As it's explained elsewhere, we should abandon the three faults of a vessel, being like a vessel with a hole in it, being like a dirty vessel, or being like one that is upside down. So here, the sort of dirty vessel is being like biased, having attachment or aversion for a particular side. And so that's the kind of unbiased mind with which we should approach the teachings. And then we shouldn't be like a vessel that's turned upside down. Like, if you are approaching it without any sort of intelligence or thinking, this is like, nothing's really absorbing, nothing's really getting in, no matter how much you're hearing, nothing is getting into that vessel. And then finally, there is the sort of like wanting to know things. If we don't have that kind of drive to actually learn what is being taught, then we can hear it, but it's like we're a vessel with a hole in it. It's not really going to remain. So as is stated elsewhere in a different verse that talks about sort of listening well and attentively with this kind of drive to actually implement the teachings, these are the sorts of qualities that we should have described in different ways. So here again, thinking that we are going to, at the very least, abandon the 10 non-virtues and engage in the practice of the 10 virtues, abandoning harming others in order to be able to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god. But going beyond that, striving to get rid of our attachment and aversion and ignorance in order to gain that state of definite liberation. And even beyond that, gain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, with this kind of attitude of actually, I'm going to implement these teachings as much as I am able to. We should set a motivation for listening to the teachings of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, that one's a did da karsora. Jiten goba bol taba seshtua. No te karsora. Jiten jin goba bol, jiten goba jiten seneko, no jiten da. Jiten seni yora. Sashitilen zambulin de tabane sashitilia, no jiten segora. Juji semjen se do, il long joba bo kansa to zola, sembe kansa to zola. Any karsora. Juji semjen long joba bo jiten segora. Jikden se do ko keji te zo sama yuran rongen re se ran jiwe ran shin che re se. Ani nyembe yang jikwe ba che re ko tunghe ji ran shin che re wa. Oye che ji de ba song za te ko pang ko ye che. 와 때다 제고 버시려 되어라 뒤선도 그 깨지긴 지지 님배 장지 버치바 임배나 니지대세 동해 된 버선도 동해기 시청게 선도고 때다 제고 버시려 되어도 어딘 거바 버실 때 소아보 지된 거바 뭐 로아 원주 첨불라 소바 어단 지된 송게 누가 요소 소바치 원주 차장 용게치 요아레스 어디 안데치 요메를 셔바치 요라 이 줄로 망보지긴 지된 거바 보 요바 켈린 거래 망보지긴 매바 켈린 게 와르노 어디 콜셔라 야
So here we have arrived at this section, the analysis of the divine creator. And so here, this is investigating then when we refer to, and here in the English, it isn't exactly put the word jikden, which is sort of like this world or this universe, this environment, referring both to the kind of external environment as well as the beings within it, the beings who enjoy the various things within it. And so here, the two syllables of that, the jik refers to this kind of being momentary, disintegrating moment to moment, having the nature of impermanence. And then the second syllable 10 is referring to sort of being the support or the foundation for all of the various kinds of sufferings that one experiences. So here, the sort of the world, one could say, or the universe can be comprised of the kind of external environment as well as the beings that inhabit it. And for many different traditions, they assert that there is some kind of creator, some divine being who has the sort of power, this omnipotence to be able to produce the entire world. So there are those that accept the kind of thought of a creator as being a creator of this world. And there are those that then do not accept such a creator. So here, this is investigating or analyzing the kind of idea of a creator.
뒤제 남께 숨당할래 중아 땡진 레버를 중아 송바 남래 세도아 뒤제 상마대로아 내진 지된다 심제긴 지된게 뒤제 상마 탐제 송거라 땡 숨당할래 중아 땡 숨래 중아 셰여라 알래 중아 셰여도 너의 값소 땡 숨래 중아도 알래 중아 땡 숨래 중아 따따는 마보셔임바 가르소래 디유난 디중 신디케 베신 디케 간데 마르 베케 도시 남세 디유난 디중세 유단케 유네바 용수 상와데 유난 데우데케 용그레세 디마도 셴지야 네바 용수 조소나 디유난 네바 용수 규진 용수 조네 네바 용수 소베 네바 디 소바디 유난 데우데케 용그레세 엘리아 디유네 케르마도 디유나야 매나야 제바 보시게 이거 삼르타네 공부 시에네 시거라 네가저 요함에 besz게 때니 중앙시게 봐 그런게 요아 제바 보켈랭게 속에 군더버데 켄도서 겨나야 예수 간가 tinde지 소근이 삼 소합에 셈데 매나 영토고 말해서 그러다 근데 본버서야 사다 이 락자다 돼서 참아 구발 간가 여바셔 송게 간사시기 다 니르지 소고 삼르타는 마스나니 봄바소토 마르도 어디나시 내진지된 데다 추기 심변데 선담데 상마데 유단케도 시요나야 대참진데 마레스 제가 보데가 데르시 고연디 소위엔디 고였음 삼르타스나니 두케르티 마네 마레스 시거노 데시거라 일이야 요함메베 캬르테네 좋아 시거래 제바 매백이 할 때는 좋아해서 그래. 제바보 매백이 할 때는 좋아. 제바보 매백이 요한 매백이 할 때는 좋아서. 이거는 된종스. 디케 베신 디케에서 달다 마부셔라. 디케 베신 우디야 딱바치 거레스. 근데 셰거라. 지루바이나 타와도 지소스 담비 주디 딱바셔도. 담비 주 딱바 마산 텔레 주샤는 간디요 말 건서 삼려 나르다. 어디에고 딱바치샤 네 대근 대부간가 기베시고라 남바치네 대요아요 마라 딱바치도 요함에 신게들 딱바시고라 안게랑 신싱메바 텔라 캐남 따시슈스 지대 연락에 딱바시고라데 인데 딱바르스 땡게실레 takwa se wa rido su takwa ri shore ne ma ne yora lo kya chimbur chi 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 tong chimbur de sigra ko ti kyinde mit takwa ri shi yong se ar shirwa takwa ri cha chen se ji den yong da takwa tele sigwara den chu na takwa de tele sigwa mare angi rang shin jing me ba tele kyanam che kechi gyudan kengyo ga jing do ren gyuan do yor ko gyuan do ge gyun che de yeshe chi ti chi ri ti me da re ge do yora yina ko ti kechi ki jing do ra ngama na shi de ge yo mara ra ju mi me se do chi na ambo ki du ne che kan de shi ore gyur che ma nge ne che da ma bu te ente ne ya yo mi cha ente ne ya chu bu chu ju je ya che tan de ba do te do yin te ngama to su tan de te ma to Cuando que sí que sí que se robo la mato ni más de tanto te yo no tiene uso yo todo tanto yo cora yo marwa no tiene caso la de yo na de yo de que be sin de que tú te que va son san drebo de que yo are ese tú tak ba si drebo que yo mare ese de yo na de yo de que be sin de que me da ba tu me que le tencho tú tak ba si ran yo ba se de que yo mare 지소 세 따바시 티 강가 깨버려서 이 따바시 어레 티 강가 깨버려서 알아 네 이런 샤미 따바요레 대소 강가 깨버려서 알아 근데 위치 강자게 대부 따바시기 tin데 깨요 마도 미다바도 메결레더니 좋아스 어레 알레 티니 질람나 어티스트 랍션 수바데 되나 되진데 기면데 간데 마리베 ken진 도시에서도 네베견레더니 Marik Batalet Niban Duji Giri Duji Sumba Namshi Kigri. Mumayin by Kiri, never young Judigi, Jebudi Kekures, Samake, Vidabayan Jusam and Rebu Samake Marwa. Shindo Am the Sikuna Am Keji Timu Mayin yelling Juchida, Ila Timu and Lenji against a Kekuyoto. Oh, I can't some Latin Jones to Tiridua.
Mm. So here then, turning to page 33 in the English, in the analysis of a divine creator, then investigating what kind of divine creator would exist or not exist. So here in the second section of the previous chapter, I gave citations regarding composite phenomena having the characteristics of arising dependently from either 3 or 5 conditions. So here, as was explained sort of previously, when we are analyzing this kind of divine creator, again, there are those that would assert that this world, the kind of container and the beings that are contained within it are created through the thought or the intention of some sort of creator deity. Whereas for Buddhists, that is not the way that they would assert things to arise. And so as we saw in the previous sort of section, there are different kinds of sort of conditions, one could say, or qualifications to the sort of cause that gives rise to things when we talk about dependent origination. So first is that, like, if the causes and conditions are complete for the arising of a particular effect, there's nothing needed beyond that. So if the causes and conditions are assembled, then the result will come forth. There's no need for the sort of intention of a creator or the thought of a creator. Those who do assert some kind of creator deity would say, like, well, think about a pot. When a potter is making a pot, they need to have some sort of intention, some sort of motivation. That's how that thing takes that particular shape. So you can't make a pot, for example, without that kind of intention. And they would say so too is the case for all phenomena within this world, the sort of environment and the beings contained within it. But here, Buddhists would say the first sort of quality or the sort of first condition is that this cause does not need to entail the thought of a creator. Rather, if all the causes and conditions are complete, that is all that is necessary. And so this is expressed in the line of the sutra itself, where it says, because this exists, this occurs. So when we have all of the proper causes and conditions, then the result will come about. There's nothing else that is needed. And so secondly is expressed in the next part that says, because this arose, this arises. So here, this negates some kind of a permanent cause. The cause of things that are impermanent themselves are impermanent. There are certain philosophical schools that would say they think there needs to be some sort of a lasting or a permanent kind of a cause that brings forth everything, whether it's like a primal substance or time or whatever it may be. They would assert that this cause needs to be permanent. Well, that's not possible according to Buddhists. We sort of, within the world, what is referred to as permanent is actually the sort of continuity of things. There may be a continuity of sort of similar types of moments where it appears as though something is permanent, but really there is nothing that is permanent, in the sense that all of these composite phenomena change moment to moment, are constantly undergoing change. If we think about it, we are here now, but we began in our mother's womb, where we were gestating for several months, and we were changing constantly. And then as a child, we were changing, and we grew and continue to change. So if we were not constantly changing, if we weren't momentary, then you would still have to be that child that you were before, for example. So this second sort of condition is that the cause is not permanent. Nothing like a sort of principal nature, primary nature, time, or permanent partless particles can serve as a cause. That cause needs to be impermanent, as it says, because this arose, this arises. And it continues saying this is called dependent arising. That is dependent on ignorance. Conditioning factors occur. And so this expresses the third kind of condition that is necessary, is that a cause has the ability to bring forth a particular result. For something like a fruit tree, like a peach tree, you plant that particular seed, and that is the kind of uncommon cause, the unique cause of that particular tree. And then there are common conditions like water and fertilizer and heat and so forth. But a cause needs to have the ability to bring forth a particular result. So this is the sort of three conditions of the cause. 고기민 두 개.
뭐야?
No.
다 깼습니다. 알레 중에서라. 깼가 수도 티가 니이래가. 유다 제발레 중에 생이셔라. 네 여난 된 중에서도 주디 여난 저비지 그래서 주면은 저비지 말해서라. 네 설루 잠에 더 값이야. 알레 마이 샬레 마이 니가레 마이 주메발레 잠에 기대서 주메발레 기 말해서 거다. 그래서 주메발레 때문에 겨 말해서 이치라. 근데 다보 메베 깰레 때문에 중앙시야. 다보 메베 깰레 때문에 좋아서 라오에 다보 말리스그라 다 자가이네. 이제 제가 보들 말리스 다보스그라. 라와도 지 다보친게 시공 유체네. 제통게 지그라 지체도 텐데 와라. 근데 엄마 다보 메베 깰레 때문에 좋아서. 뭔가 숨고와라. 제 가서라. 어디 간가 설루 잠배 더 값을 월마시 용구라. 나래 중에 땡진 대바를 중아 청이전도 송바 남래선 더 값을 지나게 직된도 상마 예 숨을 때내 중에 청이 자리에서 땡알을 때내 중에 청이 자리에서 어떤 데 송샤셔로 이나네 직된 제바부 로요함에 백견을 때내 중아서 땡안에 요함에 백견을 때내 중 대요난 대중세대 교진 상마 상선의 교진 내가 상선은 저부터 끼를 마도 일이 끼나 삼삼 마지나 삼삼 그걸라 왕게 예 이때와도 몇개와 개반 루마를 송거라 교진 내가 용 소반은 저부터 메사 끼는 거래 교진 내가 좀 마사나 저부터 말해서 어딘도 가서라 요함에 백견을 중아 스네다 제백견을 중아 제바 매백견을 때문에 중아서 어디 걸냐 원에 로스 때문에 세면대 고난일을 써볼까 송샤가 돼서 아니 시행이 세거든. 어야.
No. So then, as it says, I gave citations regarding composite phenomena having the characteristics of arising dependently from either 3 or 5 conditions. So the 2 additional conditions qualifying those sorts of causes, again, as it says, if this occurs, if this exists, this occurs. And this again, it can indicate the sort of not needing the thought of a creator or the intention of a creator, but also that things are not causeless, that they don't come about without some kind of a cause. So if this exists, if there are the proper sort of causes and conditions, that will bring about the occurrence of a result. You can't have some sort of result occur without a cause. And then we have this sort of, there's not an autonomous cause, one could say. So again, like the idea of a creator deity that has the sort of ability on their own without relying upon anything else to bring forth all varieties of phenomena, that is not acceptable as a cause. A cause is, there's nothing that has that sort of autonomous or ability to bring forth without relying upon anything else. So again, all of the kind of inner and outer world that we can speak of arise from causes and conditions. They're proper causes and conditions. And again, it's not that they don't have a cause. If this exists, this occurs. And it has to be the proper sort of causes. But it's not as though if we are lacking this kind of intention or motivation, things will not come about. Again, we don't need the sort of intention, the thought of a creator deity in order to bring them about. And so we'll look more closely at this, particularly based upon the kind of description in Shantarakshita's Compendium of Reality.
What did you know? Oh, that dear Tanda Pena, she chat at the public order. You didn't, you don't get Tana, my Yivisha, you didn't Chebabochi, and there's a so good to this Kogudu, Samsung combustion gets a quarter. You made a young Marese, I wonder if she raw. But under Delia did a call Marese, you can't never also saw sona, and it came good race. You don't can't never saw my soul and Trebuki Machita Grimado. You can't never you met at Tindre Trebuki Marese. You always sort of jump the caption good. Sabi and Dinyam to talk and you would keep a shadow yam to Messam Sigora. Can't you? The Kangalcha, Tindiana, Tommy Maribe, even to see like Kibarchaw and Yam to Messamse. Some Gumara Koran never saw some Trebuki and Godes. Never saw Mazal Tower Matachi, Kulula, Udilan, W met at Tindil Tower Matata, you are Mebeke. Kulungi, you will take Mara substance. Timu might be Nieleta, Yellow Legislature, get Timu a cute to Sansona, never saw some Trebuki and Godes. Shagura, she's a telepopura. Chipabu, yes, and get it, telepopu, Chipabu message, Shagua. In a this also the simputa current draw your listener. Chipabu, yes, and gets over Mancha, Koran location yora. I should kill Nachi or mother. Send the Janjare. And a Chipabu location, Chipabu yora, Koran Karina. Jendu, the Koran wants your and Pal location door. I should look at the Karina chamber, the social. You can't Mendoa. Nuba Mendoa, and Nambati Mare, Soso Kecha, what's your sigara. Jababu Kecha Mare, Soso Kecha. Ome Maru Kunalan, even to the less and yes, and Yogudoa. Soso Kosum, Samlutan data, less and Melatan, Jabu Yongure, Rani so race. Ita Hakogore, in Denison, you don't draw it. Shangiliba. Ravacho Netia Yabude Ravakora Locasar Chiora. That's a Marashan, the chair, you know, the Yabusha Chira Kage. Yabujan Surmato, Tubuso Maro, Sawa, you get in Gira. Umbe Rama, you be one Chachirona Sigara. Rama wants a marriage a Koran Lele to go in any Lele and to be your mother. Koran Rama Gichibabuchi Regio Mara. In the social education we in Banambe. Only dog and going in this Uda. Send a sushi going to church. Let them never say what any dog bomb. Targets all target. You should tell us all, so 오송비 쇼바 상보다 냠바니들 때네 마오바다 다데 티도 용거 요바들 이시체고라 소소 삼로 단다 간에케지 셰다 르기 쳬바체다 이 상보다 냠베차네 제부 첸딜레 티도 용에다 마오바다 티도 용 쭈쪼 티레세 라게 신부 셰부치 바 소소 지역거바 군조 요엠바보레 하르신부 킹게와라 제 군조 요아레 최대가 가서 짭기래 미개와 쭉바 개와 쭉 좁수는 게 손에 짭기래 하다 메고바 토바치기도 와 산계게 대 교레스 송거도 와 이나신 제가 있는 가서 좀 톱기도 와 이나 대체 저도 소소래도 와 최군조들에도 와 최군조도 소소 제고야 최들에도 와 소소 저어로 와 매기 빼샤는 마음부터 알는 로서 미치 시에게 지금 여버체 나는 나서 되지 다 매박해봐서 두라 다코 강가 싱그레서 나서 가르시게자 다 결혼 나서 뒤르샤 맨디던 디사나 라그린 디던 디치기요 마르세 열람 랍그레 맨사이 랍그라 랍스노 그 라바텔이 치죠 당가 디치오르사 매데 소소 사고도 소소 매 마사네 뱅 마르와 암지 사신 부카데이나 매데 강가 레네 네바 가르스레 내내 랍도 상비 취시에 저기 tö네 안다 마찬가지 내가 매기 개바 토바다 다그네네 소르메니시세 매들레제 샤샤나 예바가 가이네 소소케 에네 디마르도 소소 제고야레도 그래서 소소 소어레도 최대 소어레도 최대 랑기 때문에 와 두고도 어 뒤던달에 송구와라 뒤하고고라 다이 운전을 소바텐들 소아 때문에 전남기 초사 될 때는 소순 대바투에 텐데 영용 그래도 전남dembe 미 삼번 남자 주세마다 또 제바보도 소소에 삼사 어디 제네 대하고 고요도 야 이치란
So here, whether it is Buddhists that assert there is no kind of divine creator, but rather that the sort of results occur due to the coming together of all the kind of necessary causes and conditions, and those who assert that there's some kind of creator deity, they're both trying to sort of determine the nature of various objects of knowledge. Now, for Buddhists, they examine and see that, well, results arise when all of the kind of necessary causes and conditions come together. When there is this sort of seed or substantial cause that has the ability to give rise to a particular effect, that is how things come into being. It has nothing to do with the sort of desire to generate that or having a will of a divine creator. So here again, they would assert that all things arise due to karma. All of the kinds of necessary conditions have to come together to bring something about. There's no way that a particular deity can just change that or do things based upon the kind of way that they want. So here, for those that do think that there is some kind of a deity, they put that forth as a reason. Again, we can see, like for example, those that deny past and future rebirths, they put forth certain reasons, and maybe they're just sort of assumptions, but that allows them to place their hope in a different kind of a being. Whereas the sort of focus within Buddhism is on the individual. The individual is extremely important because you are the main one. You're the main one sort of responsible for your own happiness and suffering. You can put your sort of hope in another in terms of the three jewels as being the teacher, but you can't actually just look to them to do it for you. Rather, as the Buddha has said, you are your own master. You are sort of responsible, and you are the one who is really the witness to the good and bad actions that you have done. So the kind of focus is not on putting your hope in something external or someone external, but rather recognizing that you have to be accountable for the actions of your three doors, your body, speech, and mind. The sort of good and bad things that you do are the main causes of your future happiness and suffering. And while you can sort of look to the three jewels, they are only able to tell you what it is that you should avoid and what it is that you should engage engage in. There's nothing that they can do to protect you just based upon sort of making requests. Although you are able to accumulate merit in that way, it is really up to you to implement things. Again, as the common example is given, if you have someone who is dying and they're in great fear and they go to the best kind of physician they can find, they may have real trust in this doctor. They think whatever they say is going to be the right advice. And maybe this doctor gives them medicine and gives them advice and sends them home. Well, if the person doesn't actually take that medicine, there's no way that they're going to get better, no matter how great the physician may be, no matter how much faith they have in that physician. If they don't take the medicine themselves, then there's no way that they can blame anyone but themselves. So as a verse from the sutra says that you have to take the medicine yourself. If say a physician gives advice and medicine to a patient, but the patient doesn't take it, it's not the fault of the medicine, it's not the fault of the physician, but rather it's the fault of the patient that hasn't actually implemented these instructions. So again, we need to recognize that the Buddhist sort of attitude is that the individual is primary in the sense that they are accountable or responsible for the kinds of actions of their body, speech, and mind that are the causes of their own future happiness and suffering.
Oh yeah. At the end, in a young baby, China, young Amachima, Yoma Resigora, Cindy Kanya Resegora. I go at Chimadang Amache, to the Landorche, the church, a desert as some among the Kama, the Changiche, that was among the table you get to do. Young Amada Chimaka Shagri there. The Changi Trumchi about Trum Kasia said Dasha Moser. Rumjimato to Yoma Resera. The Malagbar Church saw the Sendilia. Arete and a carriage and a what Kibuche Yabuche Shase. Jideshima Keshe to the Tumbre Ese. As among the table to the Shashar, Maduyama Resito. Otina she Chulula. Sendimato Jawama the Chima Mavise. Sendikanya and Chulo Yora. Oh, Tituina. Sendi die Yabuchi had Dalia. Kunjo Gita, Guyara. Kunjoli Rawachi and Kunjo Sendi Yabuso Dora. Chimatangama Chimandre Kishkayomar. Nobody Mare. She said, Jawa Chima Page Church mother. Sendi to that church Shayomare. Joachima. So some have Shag Maris sent the Sopo de la de Simtic. How much a do this? Young Joe Langares ora. O take your answer the Joa Sambola at Gambala and Yores. Yasonda. Juliara. Muti the Titan Daliata Church. Joanna Joa Tungele Tando Tarbata, Sanjay Shan, Tungele Tarwachin, remember Mabushuchi ora. What in day you had to Dalia? Shishagiora. But don't send the Ganja on the Shagio Marin. Tributo the Kiwachima Pensit on the Shagora. Church and send Delia Sosu. Landoche Mabuchi to send Dele Pengiora. Send Dele Drama about the Rede Omara. Some time at the church at the Migo upon Kewachu to Champagne, Condonga, Trado, Sultana. Send Dele Sosul Pember and Nami Pengricanga. Chisonium don't do single Pember to do some Jodoa. Send Dele Pengere. In a Drebu to send this over Mara, Kawashimet on that shirt. In the Lamdan Drebu, the Namsa Kasha Bushida Yongora. Yon di Janja in a neta chibable Shida. Some tea Yongora, that is not Seri Bagasaya, Toya Koya. Tangi Shibuchi, you do that, and Robert and get you now something to get a. That is not any Kanga and Bembelu Kanga Swagate. Seri Bagasha at Drigi Mato. I should have Koya Medu some chuk, Medu some such handra. I just said it on that Chubumara. Send it on Dalia, you would on that church, Yomara. Send the Cholum Yawache would a Bunki Ruchi would a Chambaza Combo Signore, take a written that Yochima Penja. You remember some of the Ansiora. In the Sendela Pengiore, Chisol Pengiore, oh, the Kiwachimet on that ship would. Erika Yajachina, Sendelico, Zayato Yabura, Tiakuiora. Negab Kangesia. Negab the Tewato and Dalakuiora. As soon as the Mambu loves and was sorry, but love Gurese. Teni kar soha rikbala lab gure se trala lab gure se chanju semba sungu doa. Sa yobaya sa thombu lep thane tazulu lab gure sungu doa. Thane shinga dabya yanja so rikba trala tazulu du doa. Mi kwe ku kanya tandal chanju semba tende chawar sungu sungu doa. Yu rinbu samlu tangura. Te yinde shidang lamdan rebu namsha tanga shishe nezu kyachimbu shayata ti kanka yungu wara. Sende chikbu tanda ane shira kyachimbu shira ke shaya umare. Yang bimba shayata drabu drabu yawara ane. Kanka kanto tu chi te mato samlu matan say so shiren rura. O ti chi lamna. Ti sonza tantan tezu kanka shayata. Yu rinbu samlu tanda ane sabada kyachi wada mambu chi shayata yungu wara. Sende mato kyawa nga chi mena tende kwaya ke mendo. Ya ti chi lamna.
Mhm. So here, this is important that, for example, like the Charvakas, those who assert that we only have this life, they would say that there are no past and future lives. There's a verse that encapsulates this where they talk about how, oh, these scholars talk about past and future lives, but they can't actually like prove them in any way. The sort of past lives are like dreams, and the future lives are like stories. There's just this life. And so for them, they are really looking for, they might assert some sort of a deity or something that is able to protect them and give them what they need in this life alone. And that might be how they see Dharma or religion, is really just the things that are able to benefit them in the here and now. Now, according to Buddhists, that would not qualify as being Dharma, because Dharma is really to think beyond just this life. The kind of continuity of our subtle consciousness will continue into future rebirths. And with the sort of knowledge that we are going to have to take rebirth, either in the lower realms or the higher realms, or we can create the kind of causes to gain liberation, or potentially gain the state of Buddhahood, where we are able to help lead others to liberation. We're thinking beyond just this life. The reasons that one practices Dharma, engages in these kinds of practices, are in order to think about those future lives, think long term, and the kind of results that will come not just in this life. The reality is that when we practice things like love and compassion and sort of satisfaction and those sorts of things, they are going to help in this life. They're going to be beneficial for us and those around us, for society in general. But the result that we're really looking for may be lifetimes away. So here, again, there are those who might say, look to scientists. They're really just focused on this life, and they look and they say, well, can they provide us with all that we need? Can they give us like all the food that we need, or extend our lives, or those sorts of things? And really their focus is just on this life. That kind of attitude is really no different from the Charvaka sort of attitude, that there's no past and future lives. We're just looking for some sort of place to put our hope that can benefit us in this life alone. And so in contrast, a Buddhist view would say things like love and compassion and developing wisdom are beneficial in this very life. They benefit us, they benefit society, but the real results will come in future lives. So it's not to negate the importance of things like science. Again, as we talked about previously, that it is very important to have the kind of knowledge of how to alleviate the temporary sufferings of beings, how to provide them with what they need. There are all kinds of arts and sciences that bodhisattvas train in order to be able to alleviate those kinds of temporary sufferings. But here, knowing the sort of base, the path, and the result, we are thinking as Buddhists beyond just this one kind of life. Whereas when one is only focused on the sort of constraints of this one life, and say, look to scientists for all their help, there's really no difference between that and a kind of Charvaka or sort of a hedonist view.
당연히 되로죠. 다 로베 쇼츠 제베. 에메데 코는 이두베 츠루 제베 쇼라. 젠디라시다 쇼라. 어디 에메데 코는 이두바세 따도 상가라시 베치쇼라. 어디 날리르 송샤세. 이롱장게와라. 로베 군지 초당 제세. 아 동번이 계셔요르노. 라마도 주베 동바. 네 줘봐. kunji tsoda trayase. Shenji tokpa mayi dasa, o tezu, rupa kunji tsoda trawe tokpa nyibi, dame ba tunda de shen, ene chirupa la soba tezu totoku ma resi gora, shenji tokpa mayi dasa. Tangma rangwa tu trubse, rangwine trubse, kyan rido kansa inanda, chukari inanda, rangwa tu trubkira, rangwine trubkira, nganzu tongwa nashi tenpa resi, o tenpa trubwa keringi ordo, tongpa nye shedu nganzu tongwa nashi tenpa ma resi, rangwa tu trubwa, rangwine trubwa yo ma resi, lupa, mayingi chashel tene tago resi, tatala mamudu san, rupa kunji tsoda re, shenji tokpa mayi dansi, rangwa tokla metenbas, gyagali na tingeli ya namsha kandeshi cheba yina, rangwa tokpa desi, rangwa tokpa de dili sigara, rikchi se chua, rikchi tsemashi, rikchi ki, pecha yinpa che, shung yinpa che, cheba bu kansa ki cheba ma yinpa shiora, kora rangchung ki chunga yin sigara. O di rangwa tokla metenbas, di kar sore, rikchi shi sigara, rikchi shi. Rikchi ki shung tuzu kanga de, cheba bu shenda cheba bu che amare, kora rangshin ki ngobi nezu da tunpa chunga yin sigara, chachi chunga yin sigara. Dina sheba tsangma tenpa re sigara. Dila teni ane chi she mato nga zu, wangbi yulin deba sutra, tiru rikcha la sowa tong te di ngusum tong te nga zu hakura. Di mayi ge tongda chi she kwa na, rikchi shinal kar she to te, di ngoyo nesu nal kura kibi ma chebe sikre. Rangshin ki ngobi nesu da tunpa kura sikura rang dhubre, rangwaan tu dhubba she dhubre, takwa re, soya meba tinte she dhubde wara. Dina sheba tsangma tenpa re se. Dila teni she kura sigara. Sanje chumden dege tenchi drebar chunga da chi mambu she sungpa tezu kanga rikchi ki shung to zul teni ne sungpa ingi rwa sagi wara. Sanje ma chumbe kondo ina da rikchi ke linga zu pechi rikchi nal sheba chi mato tilin deba chi she chi yo marito. O di ma re sagi wara. Rawa to la meten bas. Rawa to ba te rawa ma takba yingenge tsik tina she ze sama tenpa yingenge. Yani garsori rikchi shi tila tenpa ma res, tila tena sungpa ma res ora, me tenpa. Rola penpa zaya shi baya se, re tongpa nye ta tenchi drepa chungwa te, garchen sungko resa na, rowa simchen shandal ya, landur ki ne chima chi shin shin ya chido, penpe chido sungko ya resa. Rola penpa zaya shi baya se, negab lami kopan tawet, ngele tarwa tamche kimpa tawet tundal ya, tenri ki chi sungko ya resa ora. Tenri yana chungi kone kwa kuchu sungko dwa, tin dog chuchi sungku yora, tarwa topchu sungku dwa, mundu lami kopan chupta de sungku yora, o di rola penpa zaya shepe ese, keba changmi minyo ese, keba mambul ya, mezi chingi mare, keba mambul jiden kam chagan chi chingi mambul ringli ya, simche tamche ka chunda le chamba da tsewe kune lani, shendi chupa zayani, tanda sangke tenge sungku yora, keba changmi minyo ese, tuji chimbu tagyure, tuji chimbu tangiduyo. Simche tamche tungayda trawa taga chaasam. Eche do ne langdur ki nela tsuyo koba kanga shimba chigi, tar shimba chane. Ne simche te dala teni te trawar chigi yin kongurwa. Tuji chimbu tangidu kyurwa. Tenjin drebara juwa ne, kanga sungba mawe choso. Tenjin drebara juwa sungba res. Tenjin drebara juwa sungya tali de tenpa niga yungwa ra. Kudan kela tenjin drebara juwa kunzube chudang. Tenchi drebar juya chu na rawan tu chube tongpa ke yon dampe chu se, tenpa nyingi namshat yung gora. Tenchi drebar juwa ne, kange sungpa mawe chos, mawa namki tamba se, tenchi sungpa chane, tenpa lana meba ta, tenchi tenpa chane sangye sungde sung lana meba se. Kange sungpa mawe cho, kungi de la cha chane, tingi namde tuwa cha. O tezuli cha chane, seme te kona nyi kapsu, nesu mambu shi nguyo nesu da tumba ge, nguyo nesu da tumba neda mambu shi ora, o tina su tuji sheki yin sungo ra, tina la chiribe deba tanga chiri nangben deba deba kanga mambu shi uchi ora, o tuwar shaa sung shaa se, o tina ne tatanda nga sun te su shea te, yuwa mebe kyanla tene chunga, jikten shibabu meba te, yuwek na ne, ti kotin de ma, shaking is yeah.
Oh. So here then, explaining from Shantarakshita's compendium of reality, and here I guess I'll also give the Sanskrit name, but this work then begins by praising the Buddha by saying, free from the mass of all elaborations. So here, this is again, this is referring to emptiness, the lack of kind of intrinsically established phenomena, referring to selflessness or emptiness. And this is a condition not known by others. So non-Buddhists do not realize the way that things are in terms of their lacking this kind of elaboration or not being intrinsically or truly established. And it continues saying, and not dependent on hearing the self-existent words. So here again, it's not something that is knowledge that it exists sort of autonomously from its own side. Like, for example, the Hindus would assert that the Vedas, these kinds of texts, were actually not taught by a human, but are something that is self-arisen in accordance with reality. So they sort of are like sounds that reflect the reality of the universe that are self-arisen, and they arose naturally without any kind of sort of being knowing them or yeah, the Vedas arose in this way that accords with reality. But the realization of the Buddha is not dependent upon hearing the Vedas. So again, anything according to this kind of system of the Vedas, they would say that anything that is not perceptible to our sense consciousnesses, those sort of manifest objects, that we can only know from these kinds of authentic texts. We have to consult, say, for example, the Vedas in order to be able to know those things that are beyond our immediate comprehension, our immediate perception. But here, the Buddha did not realize this independence upon those texts, but rather was able to, through reasoning, come to an understanding of emptiness. And the Buddha did this for not for his own sake, but motivated by the intention to benefit all beings. So the Buddha pursued this kind of knowledge, taught this knowledge of emptiness, of selflessness to other sentient beings, motivated by an intention to benefit them, that for their sake of being able to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, or be able to gain the definite goodness of liberation or the state of Buddhahood in order to help other sentient beings. He gave the four turnings of the wheel, taught this Dharma to others with the intention to be able to bring about their benefit. And really, the Buddha only has that kind of thought to benefit, as it continues into the next verse, the one who has a nature of great compassion. And then it says, not for a short time, but for innumerable eons. This kind of great compassion and nature of great compassion is not something that's just sort of temporary or for a short period of time, but for innumerable eons. And this Buddha spoke dependent arising and became the supreme speaker. So here, dependent arising, again, can encompass the sort of two levels of truth. Dependent phenomenon that arise due to causes and conditions, that being those conventional kind of phenomena, and then the ultimate reality of things lacking any kind of inherent existence, being empty of that sort of autonomous existence is their ultimate reality. And so here, there are, again, it says, it continues, I bow down to this omniscient being and will now summarize and explain some truths. So there are many different teachers who have sought to determine and kind of teach in accordance with reality. But here, addressing this idea of there not needing to be the intention of a creator deity, Shantarakshita here will explain some truths in accordance with the teaching of dependent origination.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that they need to balance. Rangxin one day niga dansera. Rangxin said the chizo le segura, Rangxin ba chizo se tambu chenge ki judira. Akba rese, bembo rese. Semyo ma rese, ina ko kar ko ba samade. YouTube to yo rese ra. Akba rese. Nangba chene kyu taba keling maro. Ral kyu yo mare, chizo le kyu mare. Rangxin se, wang den se, wang ju chenbo ge. 지소 다 네 원주 첨부게 양 로바체네 군이 니가 그 셔봐 접고 그래서 당신 라제바다 라메바네 세도 아 매바체 양 주셔 아데 냠도 거르셔 당신 원대서 원주 첨부 니가 셔봐셔라 아서 제단 제요 와서 아 딱발라 속바 상발라 속바 어떤데 지dengi 셔봐보다 대화 레세 여바 마레세 요아 매백견을 때네 중화레세 이시도 제송바다 셴데 대다게 땡진 레버를 중에 지나게 뭐본 대남게 제바보네세 내 참에 제바보가르스나 제바보네세라 제바보네 다왜 랑신기 지소세 아이 세제 니슈생아 스랑게 저래 어디 당부당부데 세가라 다왜 랑신기 지소세가라 들 지소 엠보레 열이야 주요 말에 따버래 이게 애니까 안 갖죠 싶어 저는 시작 안 걸려요 원주다 이게 제바다서 원주 전부 이 제바르셔라 느끼니가 하루 바로 쳤다 냠도 제바르셔라 상바다 다 딱바서기 제바르마와 상바다 안에 다 딱발어서 뭐 이렇게 돼서 제바르마와 제 대단하야 어쩐지 요즘만 보여래셔라 일단은 덤바 산제제 땡중게 뭐본데다 현다 그 넘버 또고 친지로게 기대 줘봐 대다다 저라 되네 무슨 도시서 산제 좀 된데 된데 많이 벌어 이제 뭐 대다 현다게 줘다ပဲ어전에 딱배 줄어서 봐다 이제 제바 벌어서 봐 대자가 제바티 말해서도 대다게 넘버 또고 친지로게 기대 줘봐서 이번에 친지로게 저거치 마무 줘봐셔지 계셔신이 셔야돼서라 줘봐다 줘와라 얼른 내가 무슨 도시서세 산제 좀 된데 대다 많이 방문 좀 도시네 내 송바래서라 야 디버트시
So, continuing from Shantarakshita's Compendium of Reality, elsewhere it states, lacking a divine creator's will is freedom from creation by a permanent self, Brahma, and so forth, and is freedom from creation by the principal nature or by both this nature and the divine creator. So here, again, the sort of principal nature asserted by the Samkhyas, there are those that assert such a principal nature in addition, and additionally assert some kind of a divine creator. And there are those then that are, so there are those that are theistic and those that are atheistic. And here the Samkhyas assert that there is this kind of principal nature, these 25 substances, enumerations of various categories of things, but this principal nature is itself material, and it is something that is uncaused, that autonomously gives rise to, or with the kind of help of a divine creator, then gives rise to all of the various internal and external things. So here, the non-Buddhists say that what creates internal and external things that arise dependently is either the universal principle that is the principal nature, both this nature and the divine creator, a permanent self or Brahma. So many non-Indian religions also posit a creator God. They sort of, the Buddha, the teacher, directly saw how things actually are, free of the way non-Buddhists elaborated, using mistaken concepts, that which is dependently arisen. So here, the Buddha was able to see the kind of exaggeration, the sort of proliferations of wrong ideas that were put on the things that are dependently arisen by these non-Buddhists, and based upon his understanding of reality, asserts the way that things actually are.
Pena Geba Namgese, Chiri Geba Namgi, and in the Shegrese. I Shegresina. It's a wombo land that, also Toma Yomas. Make it now a nachi on bullship and Musum de Cuba so that you reach out so but as long as you Musum to Tongara. Teacher wombo le, as long as some Tongramado, ombo and debit, go Gushandato Sigara. Ombo Shebe, many better that's Ganga. Then we also told you Maris and Razungo Sushi to Maris. You can't let any charge hours in it. Tini Tagwa can shake it, Toma Tene Toma Ese. Tini Tagwas to Rang Shinki, Rawando Drube, Tagwatina Sheba, Sama Temba Yengenge. Rijigi 6 or Tini Tagwa Rijigi 6. Ganshiki, Nale Sheba, Sheba, or the Tomate, or the Mado Telesheba, me. Rawando took Maris took Maris. And make it down one bit down to the Shingri so that so the Zoom was some the Shingri Madu, Tillen Debet, and was some the shit to Mares. Tillen Debet, and she shake you know, Rijigi, Juna Karashe to Tane, Tileta or the Sanjum, then they get attention, Rebel, you are somebody at the ambassador. Or the Mares. Sheba the Yina Miamna, Sanje Tende, Tende Jitsu Sigbadine, Rawanta Batese, Rawage. Samar Dungenge, Rijigi Shunto Sigara, Ilteni Chomares, Koran Rang Musum do Signi, Sumbare Sigara. Rale Samar Jube, Rijigi Sigla, Temba, Rijigi Sigla Made, Mandewar, Till and Dawake or Maresera. Rani Jungo Association, Rawatu Tumba, Sanja Chumden, the Raniji, Unzuta Tunda Betambanide, Musum do Section. Rangi Sigbe turned any Shandalia Rawan connected by Zebra Mado. Rishig Shula Karasheto Sin, Tina Shishaba Mares, or Tisundaya.
So here it continues saying, you say the teacher saw the reality of dependent arising, but the kind of non-Buddhist response to that, and this is coming again from the Compendium of Reality, it says, what is beyond the senses cannot be directly known. There is no way of knowing this other than by the self-existent words. So for them, these non-Buddhists would say that we are able to perceive these kinds of manifest objects. What is known by the senses can be directly known, but those things that are slightly hidden or hidden kinds of phenomena are not able to be known other than by knowing the self-existent words, than by knowing the Vedas. Now, this is not accepted by the Buddhists. So they in turn respond that it is not true. The Buddha saw the truth of dependent arising in the following manner. Without being dependent on or connected to hearing these self-existent words, that is the Vedas or other such scriptures, which are said to be valid by their own nature, he saw this truth on his own and taught it through his direct understanding. So there's no connection to the kind of Vedas or these supposed arisen scriptures. Rather, the Buddha's understanding of this kind of hidden object comes, Buddhists would say, based upon his own realizations, based upon his own understanding, not due to the nature of something being valid in its own nature, sort of like these Vedas.
Tembe Tende Shidder Songshinas, Tambasanji Chumdendege, Tenji Debra Joa, Rawa Kunzu Tantan, Tambani Kawaso Resena, Salu Jang Bendo Les, Sanji Salu Jang Bendo Nalasegora. Yugutia Dag Maches, Yugutia Age, Chitso La Soba, Tendre Capsu, Rangi Tangi to Yunia Cheben Sigora. Aki se tu zanko karsigor sne yu tu sun debu kanga yogo resigor changjambage yu tu sun debu te yo res yo res yo ne ne koran su ten yogo res wa rangshin su ten yogo res gora yu tu sun mebe debu yo ma res pena il yongar yorwa il tu su tsirni num tengu do ase il chunju tenal num yo res gora yo san su tsirni ten yo res yu tu sun yu il ki tu su Rebu num yoyo karese. Pena chema tsini num tuya midoase. Chimal no meza coach in the train yo marese. Otanashi, Omalia show your race ora. Show your uncle Chima show chayadua. Arachaya or Churachaya or two, or metus your race ora. You to so yeben Jebuke or mother, you don't need to maybe Jebuke yo mares ora, teletagis ora. You negabs rangatani yore, Chiso negabs Mobukanga yore. Sebuchen, me toya yomara, Missevici Sigura, Sebu yomara. And I could so any turn to Sebuchetina, you use to turn your god. A male chasuna Yakom Yendomare, Chiso about Timdoni, I began dead yore. Achima could do the two turn your god. Oh, tis on that Alec yore, Sigora, the Mare Sigora. Solution Bendole, you good yas. Nyugu kare nyugu ina dura drag nyugu ina da kare ni shindo da kare ni ti tsu kanga sigura agi machese shengi machese shen rale ngo tadbe kyu shenda chi rawa du tube kyu shen chi onju la so bata kare ni kyu rawa du tube kyu shen chi rebu shen che ba ya mare shengese de rawa ni rawa du tube kyu shen chi rebu de che ba ya mare sigura Shengi Maches. Nige Maches, Taki Shengi Niga Yungu Marta Niga Shaba. Wonju ki Maches, how wonju Chimbo, so Shabaya Mare Sora. Yugi Majurse, Yugi, you talk was Shea, you talk was Shea, Wabakanga, you talk by one Kichua Sura. Niku the two Wanga Niku Resor, Ni Seba the two Wanga Segars. Chatuzu K. Capsis do you Wanga Coke Capsu Gorse. Wabukanga Tujuanga Chores, two talk by Shagara. Tujuanga Maris or young and Zuparu, Tujuanga Chose, two medaba, the number two medabara. You said the Congo Chilitan Pata Sharamado. Agua Yangichi Gayomare. So you have two talkba. Chebabu, Tujuanga Kanga and Gores, Gora. Samuel Nimada now that's how I saw Tujuanga Tagua. In number killing Mardo. You talk about Mare, Nambala 2 or 2 medabare. And there is a Tapsunako, you lieutenant Jura Kalicalican and Semaya Kiagudwa. You Giwanga Koya Kiagudwa, you should two gra. You 2 medabare, 2 medabare, you give my 2 tawa. Chebabu in Bango Tamja Chebabu, you say, oh, this is what I. You said you're a shoke, Kondanga to Chitu said to Chitireta. I got this one. You get my duty, my jurse. I bet you to dig by Juracha Mares water. Ransile Machon says Chiso Ransile Chuamare. 2 men I saw Mares and Machides. When Jan Sada Chuda made a Lunda Namgada, Tugi Kamnam, Dune Sedua, a solid Joel Tigre, Chu Melo Namgada, Namgas Don Sandelis. Somebody man, a Kessera Marwa. Shego Sores, Tabusha, Kessera Mara, Tomba Corva, Don San de Puganam was a rattle, Puganamka. You got up to this. Namgada, didn't Namkataba says or Timare. Namkataba says you are a tia. How about a Rexa Meva some de Tabasura? Did Don San de Sera, Utanchi, Mopchedoa, Tomba is sending over to the Kekun and Tomba in the Pelche Yorva. What you say? I got a Namgada, do you come Nam Landune, or Tezukanga Dune? No Sabian Gavanas, Sabian Tapshaba de la Kozoe, Robert Cheche, and the Cotinea Chitoyan. Oh, did Sabian the Panga, and you could improve to this. You go on Bandu and your days. Yet are Chiru detention, Reverend I can't and draw a tower, or Chiru Jungo, she Naxala Soba Tezukangatia, or Sabian Telia, and then such you Melo, Namga, Don Santos of Robert Yugi. You that turning Gorachu, the Kalikali Duran to Ganduvision, and the King or Ese. It's not Chiru Jungo Botozo, and then Delni Kigrese. Yes, do Lenji can do Sura, Sada, Chuta, Lunda, Namkada, it's a Sigara. Juicy do Nyele de Lesura, Sabian de Lesura. Judan Kansas on a cute Nyele Sigara, Candy, Enji. Tumudu China Saga, Kangal Roba Chigra. Tume, Judela Lenji Sigara. Timu Maybe Judale Yenesigora. Just like Kendan Drenin Kegurese. Yugutabushike in a Tsushina also Karikina. Kendan Drenin Kegures. Kenkares now the Sada Chudameda. Namgatan, Yula Sobat, Sudan Drenin Kegures. Shiva, ya Tiba the Chitana.
Oh. So, here again, it continues saying, how did the teacher express his teachings on dependent arising? And it then quotes from the Rice Seedling Sutra itself, where it says, the sprout is not made by itself, not made by others, not made by both, not made by Ishvara, not transformed by time, not arisen from an essential nature, nor born without a cause. So here, it's not made by itself. When it comes to the kind of understanding of causality, there are those like the Samkhyas, for example, that assert that the result exists at the time of the cause. It's not the case that it's not yet manifest, but it exists at the time of the cause. They give the example like, well, when you press a mustard seed, you get oil out of that. And so that oil that existed at the time of the cause. You don't have, for example, when you squeeze sand, you don't get oil out of that. And so for them, this is the way in which they try to assert that the results actually exist at the time of the cause in an unmanifest kind of form. Like within milk, we could say that yogurt exists, that butter and cheese exist. They just aren't yet manifest. And so these varieties of phenomenon, they would assert, will come about. They sort of arise from this primal substance, this permanent primal substance, and then they dissolve back into that. So here, this again contradicts the kind of assertion of dependent origination made by the Buddha. The sprout is not made by itself. Whatever object we take, whether we take a rice seedling or anything else, it's not self-arisen in this way, nor is it made by others in the sense of a cause that is established as different by means of its own nature. Like, for example, some kind of a creator deity that is of a permanent self-existent kind of nature, making all of these various things. This is not how it is that things come about. So the cause cannot be established as inherently of a different nature from the result. And nor is it the case that these various kinds of things, like a rice seedling, comes about due to the sort of thought of Ishvara, nor is it transformed by time. There are those that assert that time is permanent, yet acts as a cause. Like we sleep because it is the proper time. We wake up because it is the proper time. That time is acting as a cause. Like birds are crowing or chirping because it is the right time. And so time, they would assert, acts as a cause, although it is something that is impermanent, that is permanent. Whereas Buddhists would assert in contrast that causes are impermanent. And particularly time as a cause, like it takes time for a harvest to grow. That is something that is impermanent. It doesn't have any kind of permanence to it. So here, in contrast to those that would assert that permanent time could act as a cause, it asserts here in the sutra that things are not transformed by time, nor are they arisen from some kind of an essential nature, nor are they born without a cause, nor do they arise causelessly. However, the elements of earth, water, fire, air, space, and season having assembled, when the seed ceases, the sprout will be produced. Like that, dependence on conditions of external dependent arising is to be seen. So here, it is due to all of these various causes and conditions coming about that a seedling will arise. Here, where it says space, we need to have space. Like there has to be an empty space for that sprout to arise into, or it won't be able to come about. Now here, when we're talking about like space as being a cause, we shouldn't think of it as space that is just the sort of lack of obstructive contact that could be permanent. movement, but rather this is the kind of the ability for the free space to allow that kind of sprout to come into being. And so in this way, it acts as a cause. And so here, this again is a situation where all of the sort of causes and conditions come together in order for the sprout to be produced. And that only happens when the seed ceases. They don't exist at the same time. And so here, there are causes and conditions that are necessary for the coming about of a rice seedling, for example. And so we can see that there is the substantial cause, that thing that has the efficacy to bring about a particular result. And then those kinds of coordinating conditions, like water and fertilizer and heat and so forth. And so it is necessary to have both the causes and the proper sort of cause, the substantial cause, as well as the kind of coordinating conditions for something to be brought about. This is the way that external dependent arising is to be seen.
Oh yeah. So she batar se de solu jambe do kap su song so. The she song batar se gora. Ngobo nam ra ge chu ji de de gagwa na se ra ge chu nyelen ge chu sa ben da ro ke sa shu melon la so ba de la so ba tu so ne. Ni de de. Chung gagwa na se chu nyelen ge sa ben de pang ga ne. Sa ben je te ne nyu ki mar do. Sa ben de pang ga ne. Ni nyuguya ke ngo re chara ike sabe de nyuguya ke robotele ke to suge sa chu me lo namba lo tule sobate su chigre se ora de chung ga ba na se chu sabe de ga ba na drebu ngo bo rani ke ba yin be se hotel tene yuki sobate da la tenje delne ni drebu de ke ga re chara tenje ya da ba chi da wa shin juam tenje del ba ri jo se de Judan Ken la Tene, and Judin Gagbana, Drebuti, Yaturn Yonde, Chitawashi to Juarese, Jimachi Shinchani Juarese, Tenjin Deborah Juam Senada, Judan Ken Duba la Tene, Yabuche Terra, we net on the Timbachan Chitawashi Juam Segrese, Juan Senada, Tenjin Deborah Juas, Tenjin, Judan Ken la Tenjin, Yedan Drelne, Judan Ken Lindra Mebachamarwa. Eso con drelne, edan drene kyudin gagbana, edan drene drebuti kiyan kudwa. Yelen kyudidan drene. Kyudin gasar che yanchi maadwa chil kiyawa marwa. Kyudi yone kyudi tusun drebu kiyawa tendre marwa. Kyudi panga ne gyura chigi che chani ko drebuti ya ten yungure esi gora. Tenjen drel bari chunga yin hosa. Yana ngobo nam Nango nam chu meba la tene kiwa mare ngebadu ju kuware chu ching bashi la tene chu ching debu sama ketum geten de yo mare chera ra ani jurmi je takbe ju nang bachani yo mardo takba ine jura mebe chu ching debu ki ne kadu ine keje bayen gura debu dram da ke na ko jura chura chu dilen juwa chin drone chu dan ken len juwa chene ne debu ke gura takbe ju ina takbalin juran roya yo marwa ne koran yoba sam biki yo na ni takbare keji bate ra tu da to yichile magine ne ko tamje de ki marwa jawa che ora judan ken se de june numberin juro na juchi che ele ken gi pan juro che ta ne te an jundu de ni drebu ke ora june numberin juro na shenji juro ate chera Jura maje je ju koran takba se desha ne pine drebu ki yo na ani tu ta to ke ko ya na tu chigla ma ki ba singdo da ba che am da ba che rangme yu la me ki ba shin do chawe yu la ki ga mare ani chawe yu la am ki ba chi yo na takba ki ki yo na se wara ani kunga da chi ka ba yin ke shora dil ma je ke ba kare se ne ju den ke len ju yo sa ti yin ko ra takbalin juwa mena drebu tatu keje ka yana name maki chikle tu chikle maki na yu chikle maki na tamche to maki kura takba ke drebu kena drebu di tu tatu yu chikle kena tu tatu keje ka yengure yu chikle kena yu tamche to keje ba yengure yu chikle maki na yu tamche to maki ba yengure yu gashile ke gashile maki na kon jura chin dugi betare yu gashile ke de kon jura chine 지 산주도 끼고라 윤가실 마제디 지 마산이 끼고 말아 랑가 끼와서라 랑가 끼 랑가 마기네 고 규데 딱게라 여는 유라지 체니 끼고 베타라 유단 끼게 유라지 상마살 따고면은 끼네 뒤다도 롱바실 끼네 롱바 탐실 끼 유실 끼네 뒤 탐실 끼 롱바실 마기네 롱바 탐실 마기베 총바고라 가실 끼 가실 마기 개바용 마 랑가 끼와서도 랑가 끼와서도 규데 상도 규진 상도 끼고라 규진 마산도 끼고 말아 나한테 보셔 아니 관도서 규진 바실에 끼와 메롱샤라 규메바다 규진 바실에 때는 끼와 끼고 말아 규르미지 딱바다 참미지 시부규 규르미지 딱베 줄에 데부 끼와 요 말아 참미지 딱베 줄에 에자메지 신서라 라랑 깨지기 눈dengi 규 남란지데 괴바벨로 요에 원주 채남이요 라랑 깨지기 규다 깨 요아래 텔이야 아니야 네바 용서 상이나야 텔라 안다 마집센지된 괴바보되게 굴로 삼로다는 다 깨고 요에서도 약게 용게 텐데요 말이셔라 유진기 네바 용서 손에 네바 깨운 거래서 오야 티바도 시죠 요 밑에도 오세바도
So here, once the individual causes and conditions of composite things have assembled, they cease to exist, and the composite thing that is their effect is produced. So here again, if the seed remains, we can't talk about a seedling coming about. There's no way for a result to be produced at the time of the seed. Rather, it's from the sort of ceasing of the cause that the result is then produced. That's how composite things work. And so this is therefore called dependent and linked arising, or dependent and precisely correct arising. So here it is through that kind of connection with causes and conditions, and not just any sort of causes and conditions, but the proper kind of causes and conditions, that a result is brought forth from a particular cause. So it can't be sort of a permanent cause. Again, the problem with something being asserted as a permanent cause is that it would not be able to change. Like the way that we understand is it's that change that brings a result. So something that is asserted to be permanent doesn't have that kind of capacity to bring something about. If it were the case that a cause were permanent, then it would logically, we would have to say that the effect would arise at all times in all places. If the kind of cause is asserted to be permanent, then the result too will have to be permanent. It will have to span all times, all places. There's no sort of difference in its arising. Like, for example, we can see a mango tree. A mango tree grows in places that are warm, and it produces mangoes at a particular time of year. And because those mangoes arise occasionally, we can assert that the causes of their arising are impermanent. If it weren't the case, and instead the cause of a mango were permanent, then we would have to see mangoes everywhere at all times, regardless of what kind of place it is or season or whatever. They would have to be producing their fruits. And so this kind of assertion of Buddhists that things are occasional, that they only come about due to certain, like at certain times in certain places, this is a reason that we can assert that all things are impermanent. If it were the case that there were a permanent cause that brought something about, then it would have to be the case that that result were arising at all times in all places. But this is not the case. So things are not able to arise from a lack of causes and conditions. They need to have the proper sort of causes. And they don't arise from just only one cause. It's not like there's one single thing, again, that like the thought of a creator just willing things into existence, but rather it's necessary to have all of the kind of causes and conditions come together in order for something to come about. And nor do things arise from a cause that is permanent, as it was discussed above, changeless, or a singular and partless whole. They each arise from causes that have the capacity to produce them. So here we can see the kind of conditions of those causes, that they cannot be permanent, changeless, or a singular partless whole. And those causes that bring about results need to have the sort of efficacy, the capacity to produce that particular result. And thus they cannot be produced by being empowered with the will of a divine creator of the world, such as Ishvara. So that is the sort of Buddhist rebuke to these particular kinds of causes.
Oh yeah, that is so.
So the time is up for today, so we'll stop there.
Oh yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Love's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Yeah.
Jay, we're so glad the causes and conditions have come together for you to teach us.
Kailangan nganso la chu suyang gyudang gen sangma sang yorawa. Ani
Yeah.
nganso gabo chungso.
Oh yeah.
And Katrina, so grateful for your interpretation. Thank you again. And we'll see everyone online again next Thursday.
What's on?
Recording.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that did it. Oh my. Oh, enjoy.